Mexico City is famous for its exciting food scene, its natural beauty, and its unique blend of Spanish and native cultures. This intersection is expressed in its cuisine, architecture, arts, and most importantly, to the people who watch these kind of videos, through its urbanism and public transportation infrastructure. So sit back and enjoy as I somehow make one of the most exciting cities in the world come off as boring. In this video, we're talking about bike lanes, metro transit systems, walkability, zoning, and the unique efforts that the government takes to integrate these less connected communities. Let's get into it. This is How Do You Roll, a YouTube channel that works to investigate the attempts and results of urbanism's best practices and public transportation around the world. In spring of 2023, I spent a few months in CDMX to improve my Spanish, try the cuisine, and see some natural areas that can't be found in the continental US. I also went down to try out the public transit, the bike lanes, and to see the public parks and walkable streets of the Mexican capital. It may also be true that I did this for a brief escape from the cold, wet Maryland winter. Like many tourists, I stayed in the often suggested neighborhood of La Condesa, but let's get a little bit more specific. CDMX is the largest city at 22 million residents in the Western Hemisphere. Like New York City, it is divided into boroughs, but instead of just 5, CDMX has 16. They are called demarcaciones territoriales. I stayed in the borough of Cuauhtemoc, which contains most of the city's oldest neighborhoods, and is the de facto cultural center of the city, as it houses most of the cultural institutions and museums. In each borough, there are barrios, which are collections of culturally similar neighborhoods that are all walking distance to each other. I stayed in Condesa, which is comprised of 3 colonias, which are the neighborhoods Hippodromo La Condesa and Hippodromo Condesa. Condesa is directly west of the Roma barrio, which is composed of the colonias of Roma Norte and Roma Sur. In my time here, I made sure to visit as many of the other colonias, barrios, and demarcaciones as I could. The CDMX metro transit system was really good for this. Let's start with the trains. CDMX has the highest number of train stations in the Western Hemisphere at 195 stations, just behind NYC. It also boasts ridership figures that are among the highest in the world at 1.65 million annual passengers. The system is fantastic. It is clean, fast, easy to use, and seems to go everywhere I want it to go. My Barrio Mágico of Condesa was surrounded on all sides by Metro Transit, and I had walking distance access to the 9 line, the 1 line, and the 3 line, which, with a transfer or two, covered pretty much the entire city. Maybe not all 573 square miles of it, but pretty close, it felt like. I'm a relatively new Spanish speaker, but I managed to navigate the system because it actually relies on symbols and graphics for navigation. Each station has its own entirely unique icon that helps non-Spanish speakers or non-Spanish readers navigate the system. Additionally, many of the metro stations themselves are decorated with a theme, which often matches its icon. This one is a jungle-themed station. The name is Viveros Derechos Humanos, which means nurseries and human rights. It is next to a tree nursery, which is probably what lends to the jungle theme. I won't get too much into the rolling stock or anything like that, as one of my favorite channels, RM Transit, has already done so, linked above. Anyway, the metro was reliable, fast, robust, despite the recent deadly derailment that happened in Tláhuac. The system, as I experienced it, was great, and if I lived here longer, I would have been able to hit every line instead of only just over half of them. CDMX's metro iconography is so well designed that I could easily get around without having to read Spanish at all. Considering that most of the trains and stations do not have computerized signs or maps, only static images, this was a plus. It's likely that there's not a better metro system in the world for someone who is, say, illiterate or unable to read the language the map was created in. For example, you don't need to know, get a rental bike and head towards the university, then hop on the 3 line going north and get off at Roma. What you would do is simply find an EcoBC station using the green bicycle icon, ride that towards the metro station with the yellow UNAM icon, head towards the icon that is half yellow, half brown, because that's the station you'll depart at. It's all icons. Easy, right? All of this can be achieved without ever having to read a single word, as it's all iconography. The system is not only easy to understand, but it also makes the metro rides very fun, as you can simply do all the math on transfers and exits and entrances just based on cute pictures. Get off at the cricket. Transfer at the kangaroo, not the squirrel. Make sure you get off at the corn cob. 2 fishes is closer than the shrimp. Make sure you check out the market above the mustache station. Even better, these icons that aren't cultural, they're just simply useful. A caduceus for a medical center, a cross for a hospital, an apparition of Mary of Guadalupe for her basilica, the outline of certain skyscrapers for the stops that are under them, the silhouettes of founding fathers for the streets that are named after them, 2 doctors for doctores. It was very impressive. The second best thing about CDMX's transit system is the government's earnest attempts to really try to integrate poorer communities on the outskirts into the city. And these are the types of disconnectivity that are genuinely unique to CDMX and don't really have parallels in the US or Canada. Things like using cable cars to integrate neighborhoods like Iztapalapa into the CDMX metro system. Let's talk about that. All around the outskirts of CDMX and in the neighboring Estado de Mexico are these types of neighborhoods, often very poor, with homes built precariously on the side of the mountains, historically without permitting or engineering sign-off. The geography here is so dramatic and so drastic that an underground metro would never, ever work, especially considering the highest ever metro grade in the world, without specialized cog technology, is around 13% grade, and these neighborhoods shown can frequently have cliffs that present a 90% vertical climb from one street to the next. So metros won't work here. But the city did something even better: cable cars. This system has seen great success in integrating these areas and with minimal cost and disruption to the residents. The footprint of a cable car line is minimal, as the poles for supporting the line only take up as much space as a single car, and much of these roads, where there are roads, can't even accommodate cars anyway. Connecting these barrios with the metro system has drastically reduced travel times for residents to their schools and work, and has an incredibly positive effect on the neighborhoods themselves, as the areas around each cable car station becomes a bit more integrated, a bit closer to the wealth centers, and then can support businesses here that before would have never existed. Restaurants, cafes, office supply stores, convenience stores, types of stores that are typically found clustered around areas important for a commute. These cable cars also offer an incredible view, although the people I talked to on my rides were unimpressed, as for them, it was not a fun ride through the Mexican mountains, but simply an important part of their daily commute to work or school or anything else. They were still happy to talk to me about it though, and one friend I made, a student of health sciences, told me that before this line was constructed in 2021, his commute to college by bus was 3 to 4 times as long, and now, with a cable car, he could get back home in less than 30 minutes. There are multiple cable car lines all throughout the mountainous outskirts of CDMX, and all are reachable by metro. The prices are the same for the metro. It is essentially a metro trip just above ground, dangling by wires, with way better views. The other side of Mexico City, in the southern end, has a completely different set of unique transportation complications. Instead of homes built on the side of mountains, there are instead homes built just above bustling canal systems that in pre-Hispanic times the Mexica and Aztecs used as their main method of transportation. This area, called Xochimilco, is a twisting network of canals that most people know from colorful boats and the party vibes that happen here every weekend.
Están muchos barcos.
But the canal network is extensive, and many people make their living and build their homes on these canals, with these boats being their only form of transportation. So the city government builds these locks, which it owns and operates for free to the people to allow them to move their boats across other transportation modes. The locks also prevent flooding of residential areas. This service is completely free and is an important part of the flower and plant delivery network that Xochimilco's economy relies on. Like the cable car integration projects, this is also definitely not a problem I've ever heard of in the US or Canada. And since both of these problems exist due to the complicated and dramatic geography of CDMX, they can only be solved by unique and specialized solutions like these. By the way, this is definitely not part of the standard Xochimilco trip, so make sure you ask your captain to take you to the cool boat lifts. and make sure you tip them too. CDMX also has a robust network of metro buses, which is a dedicated BRT line running down most major avenues. And you can frequently see these massive red buses churning out riders day in and day out. In addition, there are normal public buses, the RTP bus line, the trolley bus line, and all of which are being built out more as we speak. And finally, it all wraps together with the Eco-BC system. More on that later. The bus system follows a similar color-distinguished system as the metro lines, and the rolling stock is varied. There are articulated buses, bi-articulated buses, elevated bus lanes, and more. The majority of these bus lanes are completely separated from traffic with barrier-protected and grade-separated lanes. This also makes every protected bus line also a protected bike lane. Pretty smart. Eco-BC is the CDMX bike share program, and yes, like every other facet of Mexico City's transportation, it does come with its own icon and symbology. The system is currently deployed mainly to the Cuauhtémoc borough and can be used cheaply and easily through most of the popular destinations and neighborhoods in the center city. In future phases, the system will spread to other boroughs as well. Similar to New York City's City Bike and DC's Capital Bike Share, the Eco-BC system is a docked, accessible bike share system that offers ad hoc ride purchases or recurring annual or monthly memberships. It is significantly cheaper than those other two programs, though, as an annual membership is only $31.50 USD for unlimited rides. Extra charges do apply for rides over 45 minutes.
Ay, qué habilidades.
This system, paired with a network of protected bike lanes, makes getting around shorter distances pretty easy. It solves the last mile dilemma, as some have dubbed it. The drivers in CDMX, like most drivers, are chaotic and dangerous and practically homicidal, but unlike most cities, CDMX actually does a pretty okay job at protecting bikers from these drivers. The difference here is that most bike lanes are protected by large concrete bumpers and not flimsy plastic poles like they are in every US city I've ever biked in. On many arterial streets, the bikes get to use the protected bus lanes as well. The bike lanes here are often wide and can even be full car lane width, and with the barrier protection in addition to the painted lanes, I feel pretty good riding on them. The bike-only cycling lanes aren't even gutter sized, and they're definitely not half road and half curb like you see so frequently elsewhere. But in a metropolitan area where more than half of the residents don't have a car, which here is a staggering 12-ish million out of a total of 22.5 million, that means the shenanigans you see in most US cities regarding bike lanes doesn't really fly here. Many people use bicycles not just to commute and get around, but also for their livelihood. Tacos de canasta, tamale vendors, and many other street vendors use three-wheeled cargo bikes, no, not back Fiats, to operate small businesses out of their bicycles. They pedal around town with a speaker announcing their food or services, and people walking by on the street will stop and buy a snack. It's great, and the bike lanes that the city maintains directly contributes to these types of businesses remaining viable. The best and most unique aspect of CDMX's cycling culture is the weekly event that is Muévete en Bici. This occurs every Sunday of every single week of the year. From 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. for 6 hours a day, a massive portion of the city's arterial roads are closed completely to cars and thus open to cyclists. They're also open to rollerbladers, skateboarders, joggers, and everyone else. This event was the highlight of the city for me, and I made sure I went every single Sunday morning. The map for the road closures is impressive. Invariably, it encompasses the entirety of Paseo de la Reforma, which is the city's most well-traveled non-highway road. This would be like shutting down New York City's Broadway from tip to tip. Every single Sunday. Imagine a default car-free Broadway road, or a car-free 14th Street in DC, every single Sunday, with no prior organization, no registration, no sign-up fees. It just is closed to cars for 6 hours a week. It is so impressive because it is not like a small closure to appease cyclists. Paseo de la Reforma is the prime road of CDMX, and the closures extend to the Palacio de Bellas Artes, to Chinatown, to the Zocalo, to the Basilica de Guadalupe, to La Condesa, Polanco, and everything in between. These Sundays were so much fun and led to us seeing so much more of the city that we would not have been able to see otherwise. There are other videos explaining it more in depth, but in short, it works like this. At 8 a.m., volunteers, paid safety admin, Mexico City Police, and Transit Police, and other authorities will clear the roads and then put up big cones. Police or volunteers will guide the occasional cross-traffic crossing with whistles. Everyone bikes around all day and has a blast. On major crossings, like the rotundas on Paseo, the volunteers will use a big tarp that shows fun tips or advice, and the tarp blocks cyclists from entering into the roundabout while cars are in it. The routes change every week, but for the most part, the main trunk in La Condesa, Paseo de la Reforma, and all the way up past Tepito towards Basilica is always included. It's hard to find exactly what map of the next Sunday's closings would look like, and I can't seem to figure out how they know when to close what, but it doesn't seem to matter. Everyone shows up on these Sundays, and you can enjoy the day with tens of thousands of people around. If you ever intend to visit CDMX, you have to make sure you go during a Sunday. Sunday! And leave a couple hours free in the morning. This is, in my opinion, the best part of the city, and something I'd love to see brought to other major American cities. For ride shares, Ubers are plentiful and very affordable for any tourist. This is, of course, attributable to differences in global salary rates, so make sure you tip very well, if they're safe drivers. Uber drivers in Mexico City are still drivers, and every driver here is insane. Zoning and street design. This section alone likely warrants an entirely separate video, but I will distill my thoughts here until this video gets almost too long. Mexico City has the benefit of long-term organic growth. Unrestricted by the insanely constrictive zoning of other North American cities, CDMX has managed to create a very livable space. Businesses and residential units self-segregate when needed and integrate where desired. It is very unlikely that any rental unit in the entirety of Mexico City is more than a short walk away from, at the very least, a cafe or bodega. In at least La Condesa, Centro, Roma, Juarez, Escandon, and others, you will almost certainly be within walking distance of multiple choices for restaurants, cafes, bars, salons, bakeries, gyms, parks, boutiques, everything that makes a city fun to be in. Many of these places are simply just car garages that were converted into restaurants or shops long ago, or recently. This made even less people-dense areas very nice and pleasant because they were still amenity-dense. There was such a variety of dining and retail that it's really hard for every day to not be pleasant when each day starts with a croissant and a coffee that you only had to walk 50 feet to reach, not to mention how wonderful the weather is. Street vending is another part of Mexico City that warrants an entire video of itself, but here goes. Mexico City is absolutely famous for its street food, and it shows. The street food here is absolutely incredible. It also contributes to the urbanism of the city. Once you get used to seeing people selling cold water bottles in the subway stations, or selling snacks in the parks, or dog toys at dog parks, or selling cigarettes outside of bars late at night, you start to wonder why we disallow people from doing the same things here. Why is it so hard to sell anything but hot dogs from a cart without a litany of licenses? Doing so is a massive improvement to the city, and for many is a direct route to manage or escape poverty. And when I'm out late night drinking, why the hell shouldn't I be able to buy a single cigarette for the walk home and have someone light it for me? Anyway, I promise I'll make another video later and go into the pros and cons of street vending, but suffice to say I am extremely pro street vendors and would love to see the laws around this loosened here in the US like it is in Mexico City. So, while Mexico City is amazing, it definitely finds itself lacking in a few certain areas. While the biking was great and the bike network was impressive, and the Muévete in BC is nothing short of amazing, Mexico City can definitely stand to further improve its bike network. Many of the bike paths are simply just one-way car streets, and you'll often find, strangely, 5 or 6 parallel streets all going in one direction. Additionally, they're still car streets, just smaller and less arterial. Mexico City also really lacks completely car-free streets. And the only one I think I ever saw was the main shopping drag in Centro Histórico, which was definitely too crowded for a bike anyway. But honestly, every city on Earth can stand to improve its bike lane network. Another major failing is the quality of the sidewalks. Very often, like once per block almost, there are massive cratered holes in the sidewalks, or mature tree roots have erupted the cement into jagged piles of slab. Getting around any neighborhood older than Polanco in a wheelchair is almost downright impossible. Sidewalk renewal efforts are desperately needed all over the city. The biggest issue that I have with CDMX, however, is the air quality. Because automobiles are so prevalent in the city, though they are fairly removed from the interiors of neighborhoods, and the city's altitude is so great, making oxygen levels thinner than lower cities, that means that each particulate of CO2 from car exhaust is comparatively far more present in the average breath of air than in other cities. Mexico City also really doesn't have electric cars yet. The air quality is observable, and you can feel it in your eyes and in your mouth. Benzene, dirt, dust, vaporized brake pad shavings, and every other nasty particulate that comes with car dependency is in the air, and you can taste it. In all, Ciudad de Mexico is one of my favorite cities on earth, and in my opinion is directly comparable with New York City in terms of transit, urbanism, culture, and internationality. Anyone thinking of going should go, and they should definitely make sure to check out Sunday's Morvete and BC, the metro system, the cable cars, and to make sure you ask your Xochimilco Canal captain to take you through the big red machine that moves the boats. This was How Do You Roll, and thank you for watching.
Debajo de